Malika had lived in her apartment for only 6 months, but she already felt safe there. It was a modern building with digital locks, 24/7 cameras, and a smart security panel that sent alerts directly to her phone. She worked late shifts at a nearby design studio, so coming home at odd hours wasn't unusual. On the night of November 12th, 2022, she arrived around 1:50 a.m., exhausted but relieved to be home. Everything felt normal. Quiet hallway, locked door, warm lights inside. But at 2:17 a.m., while she was brushing her teeth, the security panel emitted 3 sharp beeps. Malika froze. That alert only meant one thing. Someone was trying to enter her door code and had failed 3 times. She rushed to the peephole. Nothing. Silence. She told herself maybe a drunk neighbor had the wrong floor. But something felt off. The beeps were too deliberate, too intentional. She opened her app to check the lock history. 3 failed attempts, but the time between them? Perfectly spaced, like someone testing combinations, not someone making a mistake. Malika didn't know it yet, but this was only the first night, and whoever tried her door would return again and again. The next morning, Malika couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. On her way out for work, she glanced at the hallway cameras mounted on the ceiling. They were always recording, and the footage was accessible to residents through the building's app. During her lunch break, she finally gathered the courage to open the playback from last night. At first, the hallway looked completely empty, no movement, no shadows, nothing unusual. But when the timeline reached 2:17 a.m., Malika's heart dropped. A hooded figure stepped into frame, but only partially, as if the person knew exactly where the camera's blind spot ended. They stood angled away from the lens, face completely hidden, their body barely visible. The figure tried the keypad, paused 5 seconds, tried again, paused, then tried a third time. Calm, methodical, not drunk, not confused. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Then the person stepped backward, right into the camera's blind spot, and vanished from the frame. Malika rewound the clip twice, 3 times, searching for any other clue, but there was nothing. No fingerprints on the door, no footprints on the carpet, no noises caught by the hallway mic. That night, Malika slept with the lights on, and the apartment suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. Malika tried to go about her day normally, but her mind kept replaying the hooded figure's movements. That calm posture, the slow, deliberate pauses, none of it felt random. After work, she stopped by the building's front desk to talk to the night security guard, an older man named Gregory. He listened carefully as she explained the situation, nodding but not interrupting. When she showed him the footage, his face tightened. "I've worked here 8 years," he said quietly. "Drunks don't stand still like that. They don't avoid cameras." Then he asked a strange question. "Did you tell anyone your code recently?" Malika shook her head. She never shared it, not with coworkers, not with neighbors, not even with her best friend. Gregory leaned closer. "Then someone might be watching you, or they got that code from somewhere." He recommended changing it immediately, and Malika agreed. She walked upstairs, took a deep breath, and reset her 6-digit code to something completely new. That night, she sat on her couch, trying to distract herself with a TV show, when her phone buzzed. A notification from the security app. A subtle vibration, not the loud alarm. It read, "Your lock has entered standby mode due to multiple recent access attempts." Her stomach twisted. Someone had tried again, this time while she was awake. Malika moved slowly toward the door, every step careful, silent. She didn't want whoever was outside to hear her. When she reached the peephole, her hands were shaking so badly she had to steady herself against the wall. She pressed her eye to the glass. Nothing. The hallway was empty, still, almost too quiet. But the app notification didn't lie. Someone had touched the keypad. She checked the lock history. 2 failed attempts, both in the last 3 minutes. Whoever it was had either slipped away fast or was standing just outside the peephole's narrow view. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Gregory. "I'm doing rounds on the 6th floor. Want me to come check your hallway?" Malika exhaled in relief. She typed back quickly, "Yes, please. Someone tried my door again." Gregory responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Seconds later, she heard his footsteps approaching, heavy, steady, familiar. He knocked gently. "It's me," he said. Malika opened the door just a crack, enough to see him. "What happened?" he asked. Malika showed him the lock history. Gregory frowned, then kneeled to check the keypad for tampering. "There's no damage," he said, "but someone touched it, recently." He looked down the hallway, then back at her. "I don't like this." Gregory decided to sweep the entire floor. He told Malika to lock her door and stay inside until he messaged her again. She did exactly that, double-checking the deadbolt and turning on every light in the apartment. Minutes passed. She paced back and forth, glancing at her phone every few seconds. Finally, a message came through. "Floor is clear, nobody suspicious, cameras show no movement." That should have comforted her, but it didn't. At around 3:40 a.m., just as she was about to lie down, another notification popped up on her phone. This one wasn't from the door lock. It was from the motion sensor placed near her entrance. "Movement detected at your door." Malika's breath caught. She sprinted silently to the peephole again. Still nothing. The hallway looked the same, empty, quiet, peaceful. But when she opened the security feed, her blood turned cold. A shadow, barely visible, moved across the floor right in front of her door. It drifted by too quickly to capture a full shape, but it was unmistakably human. She replayed it 5 times, slowing it down. Someone had passed her door only seconds earlier, close enough to trigger the sensor, yet careful enough to avoid the camera's angle. Whoever this person was, they weren't guessing anymore. They were studying her apartment. By the next morning, Malika was exhausted. She hadn't slept more than an hour, jumping at every sound in the hallway. Before leaving for work, she reviewed the night's footage again, hoping she'd imagined the shadow. But no, there it was, a quick, silent movement across the carpet, close to the floor, like the person was crouching to stay beneath the camera's view. That detail made her stomach sink. This wasn't someone casually trying doors, this was someone who understood surveillance. At work, she couldn't focus. She kept checking her phone, refreshing the app, monitoring the live hallway feed. Around noon, she finally decided to call the property manager. She explained everything: the failed code attempts, the hooded figure, the shadow, the motion sensor alert. The manager listened patiently, then said something Malika wasn't prepared for. "We haven't had any reports of suspicious activity from other tenants, but you're not the first person this month who mentioned unusual lock behavior." Malika sat up straight. "What do you mean?" "There was a similar issue on the 4th floor. A tenant complained someone kept trying their code late at night. We changed their lock system entirely." Malika felt chills run down her arms. Someone was targeting apartments in the building, methodically, quietly, one by one. And now, they had moved on to her. That evening, Malika returned home before sunset for the first time in months. She didn't want to walk into another dark hallway alone. As she approached her door, she noticed something she hadn't seen that morning: a tiny scratch near the keypad, almost like a tool had scraped against the metal. It wasn't deep, but it was new, fresh. She snapped a photo and sent it to Gregory. He replied instantly, "Stay inside. I'm coming up." While waiting, Malika inspected the rest of the door. The handle felt slightly loose, as if someone had pulled on it harder than necessary. Her heart pounded. When Gregory arrived, he crouched to study the scratch closely. "This wasn't here yesterday," he confirmed. "Someone tried something, maybe a lockpick, maybe a small screwdriver." "Are you saying they're trying to break in manually now?" Malika whispered. Gregory didn't answer at first. He instead asked, "Did you change your code, like I suggested?" "Yes, yesterday." He nodded slowly. Then someone got frustrated. He tightened the handle and told her he'd file a report with management. But when he walked away, Malika noticed something strange. He looked worried, much more worried than he had earlier in the week. That night, she pushed a chair under the door handle before going to bed. She'd never done that before. Malika managed to fall asleep around 1 a.m., but it didn't last long. At 3:06 a.m., she jolted awake to a faint metallic click, soft, controlled, like someone gently testing the handle. She stayed still, barely breathing, listening. Another click, then another, each one subtle, spaced apart by a few seconds, as if the person outside was being painfully careful not to make noise. Malika reached for her phone with trembling hands and opened the live hallway feed. The camera showed nothing, just the same quiet stretch of carpet and her door in the corner of the frame. But the sounds continued. She typed a quick message to Gregory. "Someone is at my door right now. I hear the handle." He didn't answer. She waited, staring at her phone, hoping for the familiar buzz of his reply. Nothing. The clicks stopped abruptly, replaced by total silence. Malika slowly tiptoed to the peephole and looked through it. Still nothing. No shadow, no movement. Whoever had been there had slipped away fast. When she returned to her phone, she noticed something alarming. The app showed no recorded motion outside her door. No sensor alerts, no logs. Someone was now managing to approach her door without triggering a single system. And that meant only one thing. They were learning. The next morning, Malika made a decision. She needed more information. Relying on the building's cameras wasn't enough. After work, she stopped by an electronics store and bought a small, battery-powered camera, one designed to sit low on the floor, almost invisible. When she got home, she placed it directly across from her door, tucked near the baseboard, angled upward. If someone crouched or stayed in the blind spot, this camera would catch them. She felt a small sense of control returning, but it didn't last. Around midnight, Malika checked the hallway feed out of habit. Empty. Quiet. She checked the new floor camera. Also nothing. Before going to bed, she reviewed the footage from earlier in the evening, and that's when she spotted something strange. A figure at the far end of the hallway, standing perfectly still. The person wasn't close, not even within range of her door, but they were facing her apartment, directly, motionless. The building camera picked them up for exactly 9 seconds before the figure stepped backward and completely disappeared outside the camera's view. Malika felt her chest tighten. They weren't just trying her door anymore. They were watching her, studying her movements, learning her routines. And the worst part was the realization gnawing at her mind. This person knew exactly where all the cameras were. Malika barely slept that night. The image of the silent figure watching her apartment replayed again and again in her mind. The next morning, she hurried downstairs to speak with the property manager in person. She showed him the footage, expecting urgency, concern, anything. Instead, the manager looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact. "I'll forward this to the security team," he said flatly, "but these cameras sometimes glitch. Could be a compression artifact." Malika stared at him. "A compression artifact doesn't stand still, stare at my door, then walk away." He sighed, lowered his voice, and finally admitted, "Look, we're already dealing with a serious issue on the 4th floor. If word gets out that someone is stalking tenants, it will cause panic. Just give us time." That answer didn't sit right. As Malika left the office, she noticed something else. A maintenance man she'd never seen before, watching her from the far end of the lobby. He looked away the second she met his eyes, pretending to read a clipboard. But his posture, the stiffness in his shoulders, it felt intentional. When she stepped into the elevator, her phone vibrated. An alert from her new floor camera. "Motion detected outside your door." Malika wasn't even home. Someone was already waiting for her. Malika's heart pounded as she opened the footage from the floor camera. For a moment, the screen was black. Then the image loaded. Someone was kneeling at her door. Not standing, kneeling. Their head was lowered, their face hidden by a hood, and both hands were pressed against the bottom part of her door, as if feeling for vibrations or checking the threshold. The angle was perfect. The new camera captured everything. Malika's breath caught. The person wasn't touching the keypad at all. They were examining the gap under her door, slowly, deliberately, like they were trying to understand what was inside. Then something worse happened. The figure leaned forward until their ear was pressed flat against the door, listening. Malika felt sick. They were checking if she was home. After 10 seconds, the person stood up and stepped to the side, disappearing into the same blind spot the hooded figure used before. The recording ended. She replayed it 3 times, hands shaking. This wasn't random harassment. This was escalation. Someone wanted inside her apartment specifically. She immediately messaged Gregory. "Someone was at my door again today. I have footage. Please call me." Seconds passed, no answer. A minute, nothing. 5 minutes, still nothing. And then her phone buzzed. But it wasn't Gregory. It was the building manager. "Gregory called in sick today. He hasn't been here since yesterday." Malika stared at the message, her pulse thundering in her ears. Gregory called in sick? But he had texted her last night. He had promised to monitor her hallway. Something wasn't adding up. She immediately checked her phone messages again. The last text from Gregory, "Stay inside, I'm coming up," suddenly felt different. The timing, the tone. What if it hadn't been him at all? A cold wave swept through her. She called the building manager. "When did Gregory call in sick?" "This morning, around 7. He left a voicemail. Sounded rough." "Did you see him?" "No. Why?" Malika swallowed hard. "No reason. Just curious." But she wasn't just curious. She was terrified. If Gregory hadn't been working last night, then who had she let near her door? She opened her hallway footage from the previous evening. There he was, Gregory, walking toward her door. But the angle was too far to see his face clearly. His walk looked different, faster, more rigid. Malika zoomed in. The uniform looked correct, but something was off. The shoes. Gregory always wore thick, heavy black boots. The man in the video was wearing light gray sneakers. Her chest tightened. The man she trusted last night, the man she let approach her door, wasn't Gregory at all. Malika's hands trembled as she rewatched the hallway footage. The realization slammed into her. The impostor hadn't tried to force his way inside that night. He hadn't tested the lock. He hadn't touched the keypad. He had only come close enough for Malika to open the door a crack. That was the goal, to get her to unlock it herself. She slammed her laptop shut, grabbed her bag, and decided she needed to leave the building, at least for a few hours. She didn't feel safe there anymore, but when she reached the elevator, the doors slid open before she pressed any button. Inside stood the maintenance man she had seen earlier in the lobby, the one who stared at her. He smiled faintly. "Going down?" Malika froze. Actually, I forgot something. I'll come later." The man's eyes lingered on her a second too long before he nodded and the doors closed. Her entire body shivered. She rushed back to her apartment and locked the door, breathing heavily. She needed a plan. She decided to forward all the footage, the hallway, the shadow, the kneeling figure, the impostor, to the police. She uploaded everything, attached a detailed report, and hit send. The confirmation appeared. "Your submission has been received. Officers will contact you shortly." Relief washed over her. But 30 minutes later, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. "Stop sending videos." Malika's blood ran cold as she read the message. Stop sending videos. No name, no explanation, just a command. She immediately checked the number. It wasn't the police department. It wasn't any contact she recognized. Her hands shook violently as she typed back, "Who is this?" No response. Instead, 3 dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then they disappeared, reappeared, disappeared again. Whoever it was seemed to be watching her reaction in real time, hesitating on purpose. Finally, a second message arrived. "You're making this harder." Malika's heart pounded against her ribs. She locked her phone, then unlocked it again, hoping it was some kind of glitch. But the messages remained. She ran to her router, unplugged it, and shut off Wi-Fi entirely. Then she disabled mobile data. Anything to stop the messages. Her phone buzzed anyway. One more text, this one shorter, colder. "We know you're home." Malika stumbled backward, covering her mouth. Someone was outside. Someone was watching her apartment this very second. She slowly approached the peephole, terrified of what she might see. She pressed her eye to the glass. The hallway was empty, silent, still. But then, very slowly, a shape moved into view. A person standing completely still, facing her door. And they were holding her floor camera in their hand. Malika stumbled back from the door, her breath hitching in her throat. The tiny camera she'd placed on the floor, the one meant to protect her, was now in the hands of the person trying to get inside. They had found it, removed it, and were now showing it to her like a warning. Malika grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The operator answered quickly, but Malika struggled to get the words out. Someone is outside my apartment. They've been trying to get in for days. Please send someone." The operator kept her calm, asked for the address, and told her officers were on the way. Malika clutched the phone to her ear as she moved away from the door. She tried to listen for sounds outside. At first, nothing. Then, a soft tap. 3 taps. Slow, deliberate, like knuckles gently knocking. Then, a whisper, barely audible through the door. "Open it." Malika screamed and dropped the phone. She backed into the kitchen, grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a heavy cast-iron pan. Her entire body shook as she waited for the sound of the knob turning, the door breaking, anything. But instead, the whisper came again, softer, more controlled. "We just want to talk." Then the footsteps began, slow, dragging footsteps moving away from her door, toward the stairs. Malika stayed frozen in the kitchen for nearly a full minute, pan gripped tightly in both hands, waiting for the footsteps to return. But they didn't. The hallway fell completely silent again, eerily, unnaturally silent. She retrieved her phone from the floor just as the 911 operator came back on the line. "Ma'am, officers are 3 minutes away. Stay on the call with me. Don't approach the door." Malika nodded even though the operator couldn't see her. She whispered, "They were right outside. They whispered through the door. They had my camera. They knew I was home." "Stay where you are," the operator replied. "Help is almost there." Malika crouched behind the kitchen counter, every muscle tight with fear. She listened desperately for any sound in the hallway, footsteps, a door closing, anything. But there was nothing. Finally, the operator said, "Officers have arrived. They're coming up the stairs now." Malika crept forward, staying a safe distance from the door. Then she heard it, a firm knock. "Police!" Her entire body sagged with relief. She unlocked the door, leaving the chain on, and peeked through the small gap. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. Malika removed the chain and opened the door fully. But the hallway wasn't empty. At the far end, barely visible behind the officers, someone was standing in the shadows, watching. Malika's eyes widened, and she instinctively pointed behind the officers. "Someone's there, at the end of the hallway." Both officers spun around, hands on their holsters, but the second their flashlights lit the far corner, no one was there. The space was empty, completely empty. "Are you sure you saw someone?" the taller officer asked. Malika nodded frantically. "Yes, they were standing right there, watching us." The officers exchanged a quick look, then moved down the hallway, clearing every corner, checking every doorway, every emergency exit. Nothing. No footprints on the carpet, no sound of running, no doors opened. It was as if the person had vanished. Inside the apartment, Malika showed the officers the videos she had collected, the shadow, the kneeling figure, the impostor pretending to be Gregory, the texts from the unknown number. The officers' faces hardened as they watched. This was no prank, no misunderstanding. "This is targeted," one of them said quietly. "Someone's been watching you for a while." They inspected her door next. One officer crouched down and frowned. "Your deadbolt. Look at this." A thin, almost invisible scratch ran along the metal plate, fresh, deliberate. Someone tried a tool here, recently. Malika felt her knees weaken. They weren't just testing her door, they had tried to open it. The officers recommended Malika leave the apartment for the night. "We'll file a full report," one said. "But whoever this is, they're not acting randomly. You shouldn't stay here alone." Malika agreed immediately. She grabbed a few essentials, her laptop, charger, a change of clothes, and the officers walked her down to the lobby. As they reached the ground floor, the taller officer paused by the security room. "We're going to pull all the hallway footage for the last week," he said. "If this person has been stalking you, it'll show up." Malika waited with the other officer in the lobby. Her nerves eased slightly, knowing she wasn't alone. A few minutes later, the tall officer reappeared, holding a USB drive, but his expression was stiff. "We have a problem," he said quietly. He pulled Malika aside and lowered his voice. "The footage from your floor, it's missing." Malika stared at him. "What do you mean missing?" "Deleted," he said. "Someone accessed the security system and erased every clip from your hallway from the last 10 days. Malika felt the blood drain from her face. "Who can do that?" she whispered. The officer exhaled heavily. "Only 2 people, a building manager or someone who works maintenance." And Malika remembered the man from the lobby, the one staring at her. Malika felt her stomach twist as the officer's words sank in. The maintenance worker, the man who stared at her, who stood in the elevator, who always seemed to be nearby. He had access to everything, every door, every camera, every blind spot. The officer noticed her expression change. "Do you know someone in maintenance?" Malika nodded slowly. "I saw someone earlier today. I don't know his name, but he watched me. It felt wrong." The officers exchanged a heavy look. "We need his information, now." They rushed to the front desk. The night receptionist checked the employee list. After a moment, she frowned. "There are only 2 maintenance workers on staff. Neither of them match your description." Malika's heart skipped a beat. "Then who did I see?" The receptionist looked confused. "What floor were you on?" 6, Malika answered. The woman hesitated. "The only person assigned to that floor this month was Gregory." Malika froze. "Gregory didn't come to work today. He was sick." The receptionist checked again. "He didn't call in sick. He clocked in this morning. He even checked out tools." The officers turned to Malika, realization dawning. If Gregory was here today, then who called in sick? Who texted her? And who came to her door? A cold dread washed over her. There was no impostor pretending to be Gregory. The real Gregory was missing. The officers immediately requested access to the building's internal logs, keycard scans, tool checkouts, door entries. The receptionist brought up Gregory's file. His keycard had been used multiple times throughout the day, but every scan was on the 6th floor. Not once did he enter any other floor, the break room, or even the lobby. One of the officers muttered, "That's impossible. He'd have to move between floors to do his job." Malika felt her throat tighten. She whispered, "What if he never left the 6th floor?" The officers exchanged grim glances. "We need to search it now." They escorted Malika outside the building while backup arrived. She watched from the parking lot as 4 officers, flashlights in hand, headed inside. Minutes crawled by. Every sound made her flinch. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Then, a radio crackled from inside the building. "Control, we found something." Malika held her breath. Another pause. Then the officer's voice came through, low and shaken. "There's a maintenance closet on the 6th floor, forced open. Inside we found tools, clothing, and a phone belonging to Gregory. No sign of him anywhere." The officer stepped outside to speak directly to Malika. His expression told her everything before he said a word. He said, "Whoever's been stalking you, they took Gregory first, and they've been living somewhere inside this building. The case remains open. No intruder was ever found. No one ever saw Gregory again." And Malika moved out the very next morning. After moving out the next morning, Malika stayed with a friend for several weeks. She changed her phone number, her email, and even her daily routines. But the fear didn't disappear overnight. Every time she heard footsteps in a hallway or a key turning in a lock, her chest tightened. Trauma leaves quietly, but it never leaves completely. The police continued their investigation, searching the building top to bottom. They found signs someone had been hiding in restricted areas: food wrappers, a blanket, a flashlight, and a small pile of personal belongings. But there were no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace leading to the intruder's identity. Whoever lived there had been careful, experienced, patient. Gregory's disappearance became the center of the case. His phone, his tools, even his uniform were found, but not a single clue to where he was taken. His family held a memorial for him 3 months later with no answers, no closure. As for Malika, she eventually found a new apartment in another city, a safer one, a quieter one. But sometimes, late at night, she still checks the lock twice, 3 times. Sometimes she wakes up convinced she heard a whisper through the door. And sometimes she still wonders what would have happened if she had opened it. Some cases end with arrests, some with justice, and some, like this one, end with a single chilling truth. The most frightening monsters are the ones we never see.